This video is going to cover adding in cosmetic usernames that we can use to populate throughout the application. So we'll update the homepage usernames, we'll update the usernames in the chat list, the usernames in the overall window here, and the usernames in the actual chat rooms. So it's really not that complicated. It's just something that I was asked about, so I figured I would cover it real quick. The only migration we need to add here is going to be this migration to add the usernames, which is going to be Rails G migration, add username to users, and then we'll just say the username is of type string. You could also add in the unique if you'd like to. I'm going to ignore that, and instead I'm just going to do the validation in the model just to show you how that's done. Try to change it up every time I cover this. We can then do a Rails DB :migrate command to migrate the database. And I'll run into an issue because I've already migrated this database before in the demo application. So I'm just going to leave it in there and we can sort of step through this. So what we want to do is go into our user model. So say app models and user.rb. And in here, we just need to add a validation for the username. I'm going to hit Control B to hide that side panel and bump up the font size 1 just so that we can actually see what I'm typing here. And all we're going to do over here is just say that we need to validate the uniqueness of the username. So you can see right here, we have a validates uniqueness of username, comma, with a required true and a case sensitive set to false. I'll hit Control S on that to save this and it'll automatically format it. Once that's done, we can then come into our registrations to update our devise registrations. So whenever we create an account or edit an account, we need to make sure that we have the ability to update this username. So in this registrations edit page, we're going to need a field below the email. We'll just say this field is for the username. So there's a label of username, a text field for the username, and a required of true. We can then also come in here and we can add requireds for the rest of these because they are technically also required. We can then come down to the current password field and we'll throw this on here. We don't need it on the password or the password confirmation. Once that's done, we have the required on the email and the username as well as on the current password. We don't have it on the new or the new confirmation because we don't necessarily need to be changing those. And these will be null by default. The email and the username will be pre-populated, so they'll already have data in them if you've set them before. So now that we have that, let's come into the new page. I'm actually going to come back to edit real quick, and I'm going to grab this username field. And then in the new page below the email, we'll add in the username, and then we'll add a required to the email. We could add one to the avatar, but I really don't know if we need to, because we already have the validations in place if we don't have an avatar. And then we'll add it to the password and the password confirmation because here we actually do need to have these because this is for the new user account page. Once that's done, we can then come into controllers and we need to come into our users controller and our registrations controller. And in our registrations controller, we just need to add a key for the username. This will go right alongside the avatar. We can do a Control S on this after we add it to both the configure sign up and configure account update parameters. Once that's done, we can come over to our application. I'll type Rails S to start the server, and then I'll go to the home page and it'll ask me to run the pending migrations. Okay, so I do actually have to drop my database. That's no big deal. I'll just type Rails DB :reset. It'll drop the database. It'll tell me I have a pending migration. So then let's do a Rails DB :migrate command. And now let's do a Rails DB :seed command to seed the database. Okay, and now we can type Rails S to start the server again, and we can refresh the page. So I'm going to log into dean@example.com with a password of password, and it takes us into the application. We have no messages on the side, and if we come into the edit account, we need to add a username. I'm not going to do that though. I'm going to click on Start Chatting. And we can see that there are some rooms here, but there's no other users. So let me just type test here to add in a message. Okay, so one thing to note, because we were getting this weird null error here, if I just get rid of this and I get rid of this end and I save this, we should run into it again real quick. So I'll just type 1, 2, 3, I'll hit send, and you'll see that we have a target or targets must be supplied. Basically, this message to remove is nil because it's trying to grab the fifth element of an array where the message.count is equal to 2. Of course, there's not a fifth message to remove if there's only 2 messages. That's because the home page displays the 5 most recent messages. So to fix that, you can just wrap this inside of the message.rb broadcast to homepage, wrap the broadcast remove to in a unless message to remove.nil check. And once that's done, we can come in here again and we can just type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it'll just send the message, and you'll hear that we have the Discord sound effect playing if you have that sound effect enabled and if my OBS is capturing it. Once that's done, we can then come in here and we can update all of these usernames. I'll then come over here, I'll refresh again. So now we have a nil username, and now we can go through this real quick. This will just allow us to do the error checking as soon as we start using this username. So to actually use it, all we have to do is come down to our views, and we're going to come down to, I guess, the message first. We're just going to do a Control F for email, and anywhere we see email, we're just going to change it to username. One of these is in message. I think another one might be in the message preview. One more might be in the room's index page. Just search for email again. Looks like there's 2 occurrences. There's one right there, and there's one down here. And maybe there's one in the user.html. Looks like there is, so we can change that as well. So I'm going to come over here and refresh the page, and you'll see that there is no username appearing there. We can click Start Chatting. You can see that up here it has /user/1, which is the URL for this user. And you can see here it has private_1_1, which is a private chat between user 1 and user 1 because I'm clicking on my own chat. You can see that John has an updated account name, so that one works just fine. So anywhere where it's nil, it's actually just using the URL there. If we come into the general chat, it's the same deal. It's a link to myself, so it's just /user/1. But if John were to message it, if I come in here and I go into general, come over to John's chat and I search for general and I join general, I type 1, 2, 3, 5. This one works just fine with the username. So what we have to do is we have to update this little message right here with the preview, and we have to make sure that if we have no username that we're actually forced to set it. So to force a user to set a username, you have a couple different options. The one that we're going to go with is a application controller check. So we'll come up to our controllers, application controller. And in the application controller, after we do the before action to set the current user, we'll do a before action to validate the username. And we can come down here and we can just say def validate _username. We'll type end, and then in here all we have to do is check if the current user is nil. If the current user isn't nil, we can then do a check to see what page we're on. In this case, we'll be on the edit user account path. So if we are already on the edit user registration path, then return. Otherwise, we're not there. We have no username. So this is fine. So if we have no username, we then want to redirect to the edit user registration path. And we can either do a notice or we can do an alert. Doesn't really matter. It just says, please update your username before continuing. So now if we exit out of here and refresh the page, Dean will get redirected to the edit users account page and John will not. So this forces the user to update their stuff. So now let's try to set the username. So we'll set it to Dean. We'll give it a current password and this won't work. The reason why this won't work is because although we are currently on the /users path, we do actually need to post to, I think it's /users maybe. And what that means is instead of checking if we're on the user registration path, we just need to check if we're in the /users path. It's essentially the same thing, but when we post to /users update, it should now allow us to update our account. So now if we click update, that'll go through, the username will be updated. And if we come in here, this works. So this username's here, this username's here, this one's fine. If I send a message to John though, this still says dean@example.com and this still says john@doe.com. So So we do need to actually come in here and figure out where those are coming from. For that, I'm going to type Control-Shift-F, and I'm going to do user.email. You can see here in the last message partial, if I full screen this, in the last message partial, which is in app views rooms, we do still have a single username. So I'm just going to grab this, type username, and I'll move this back over, refresh the page, and now it says John and Dean. And that's sort of a quick, I guess, crash course on how you can update something like this. Again, I'm not here to teach best practices. I'm just here to teach the practices that I know. So hopefully this was helpful, and I will see you in the next tutorial.